I represent the state of Vermont in the United States Senate. Turns out the state of Vermont is one of the most rural states in America. Vast majority of the people in this small state live in communities of 1,000 or less. Many live in 500 or less. Number of years ago, I spent a couple of years living in a town in the northeastern part of the state, the most rural part of a rural state, which had about 200 people. In my view, and I think in many of your views, people watching this, the rural life is a good life. You know, people want to live in big cities. That's great. We have some wonderful cities in America. But nobody should be ashamed about growing up in a rural community where everybody knows everybody, where people are producing the food that we need in order to stay alive, where kids go to school for their entire lives together, where there's a really strong sense of community. What you understand today, though, and what I understand, is that rural America is in a state of very significant decline that has only gotten worse as a result of the coronavirus. All over this country, we have seen, and this is really a tragedy, we have seen more and more young people leave the small towns that they grew up in and the towns that they love, not because they did not want to stay, but because there were fewer and fewer jobs there that paid them a living wage. And there's nothing more tragic, I think, than seeing kids say, I love this community. I want to stay here. I want to raise a family here, but I can't find any work. And on top of that, we have seen rural hospitals. We've seen schools, churches, and community centers shut down. And we've seen once vibrant main streets become boarded up and deserted. I have traveled as a presidential candidate all across this country. And I've gone through state after state and you hit the rural areas and there's the downtowns and store after store is boarded up. All across rural America, we have seen family farmers go out of business. In my own state of Vermont, big dairy state, we have seen farms that have been in the same family generation after generation. They're going out of business. Despite the fact that so many people love the idea of growing up on a farm. Growing up on a farm in many ways is a good life if you can receive a decent income. But today, farmers in one commodity after another are receiving prices that they're unable to live on. We have seen that because significantly large agribusiness corporations and factory farming are taking over agriculture. And this is, you go to Iowa, the people there know it. People in Vermont know it. But in big cities all over this country, people do not know the degree to which big corporate agribusiness and family and factory farming are just driving family farmers off of the land. And this is a message we have got to do a lot better job in getting out. And as George mentioned a moment ago, instead of seeing good jobs in rural America, instead of seeing better quality education, instead of seeing more healthcare coming into our rural communities, we are far, far too often seeing desperation and depression and a terrible increase in suicide and opioid addiction. In fact, amazingly enough, all across rural America, with the opioid epidemic, with alcoholism, with drug addiction, with suicide, what we are seeing in many communities actually is a decline in life expectancy. People are actually living shorter lives than their parents did. Furthermore, since 2010, 128 hospitals in rural America have shut down, and an additional 430 rural hospitals are facing serious financial problems. And what you're seeing in communities all over this country, if you get sick, you don't have a doctor, you don't have a hospital in your community. You got to get into the car and travel an hour and a half to get the medical care you need in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. That is totally absurd. Since 2011, over 4,400 schools in rural areas have closed their doors because young families are leaving their communities. Between 2017 and 2018 alone, We lost 12,000 family farms in America, and today farm bankruptcies in the Midwest are at the highest level in modern history. Over the past 40 years, the United States has lost 90% of its pork producers, 88% of its dairy producers, and 95% of its egg farmers. Today, just 4 large companies control 82% of the beef packing industry, 85% of the soybean processing industry, 63% of pork packing, and 53% of chicken processing. We cannot create an economy that works for all Americans if we continue to neglect the needs of rural America. And we all know what we have to do. What we have to do is break up agribusiness. We got to end factory farming. We got to invest in rural America in good paying jobs. Especially during this pandemic, we have seen how horrific it is that there are communities that have limited broadband service, limited cell phone service. You cannot attract businesses into a small town if you don't have good broadband and good cell phone service. We need to invest in rural America in terms of healthcare, in terms of education. We need to invest in our family-based agriculture. There is huge potential for job creation in rural America in sustainable energies like wind and solar. But the first thing that we have got to do is to understand the problems that rural America are facing. So I just want to thank all of the people who are participating on this live stream and to all of the viewers, because we are together going to stand up for rural America, and we're going to create an economy in this country that works for all of us, Black and white and Latino, Native American, Asian American, gay and straight, all of us, and not just a handful of billionaires. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about rural America as well. So let's stand together. Let's rebuild rural America. Let's make sure that our kids can grow up with security and with prosperity in the communities that they love. George, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Now we're going to hear from folks who are seeing each other, who are fighting for rural communities, for clean water, for the land, for their health, and just for a fair shake. And we're going to start with Ona Asai, an organizer with Pennsylvania Stands Up. Ona, thanks for being here.
Thank you, George. I want to thank Senator Sanders and People's Action for hosting this town hall today. My name is Ona Osai, and I'm an organizer with PA Stands Up. I live in Enhaut, PA, which is an old steel town right outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I worked grocery retail for 15 years to support myself and my daughter. In that time, I saw the decline of available full-time positions and healthcare for people in my field. While I was offered healthcare in my position, every year it covered less and less. And as a person with a child with severe food allergies, I was still paying thousands of dollars out of pocket for her medications. I felt like I would be working until I was 90 years old, and I still wouldn't have enough money to live a comfortable life. Last fall, I was deep canvassed at my door by someone from Pennsylvania Stands Up. We talked about immigration and healthcare, which are two issues that are very important to me as the child of a Nigerian immigrant and as a retail worker, struggling with prescription costs myself. After that conversation, I joined Pennsylvania Stands Up and knocked doors all over rural PA. What I found was that I had shared experiences with almost everyone I spoke to, regardless of whether people identified as a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. No matter who they are, what rural people are feeling is a sense of being left behind by our current system, knowing that our hard work is not being appreciated and that someone somewhere is benefiting from that. When we would discuss the ways that people in power use immigrants or people on unemployment as a scapegoat while they turn around and allow their powerful and connected friends to dig into our pockets, people knew that we were telling the truth. Now at PA Stands Up, we use that same tactic of open and honest conversations with voters in rural communities while calling out the divisions of race and class explicitly to move them into action. We're building power across Pennsylvania so that people can see that each of us has a stake in defeating Donald Trump and creating a Pennsylvania that works for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ona. Next up, I'd like to introduce Barb Kalba of Iowa CCI Action Fund. Welcome, Barb. Good to see you here.
Thank you, and thank you to Senator Sanders and People's Action for holding this important meeting today. My name's Barb Kalba. I'm a fourth-generation family farmer from Iowa. I'm a registered nurse and a longtime member of Iowa CCI Action Fund. I live in Adair County, Iowa, population 7,063. House File 519 was signed into law in Iowa in 1995, allowing for the construction of factory farms in our state. In 2002, a man came from 60 miles away to put a factory farm a quarter of a mile from my house. Well, that meant that I'd have 7,200 hogs living there who put out 10 million gallons of liquid manure every year. So I wouldn't be able to drink my water or even open my window for a breath of fresh air. I used to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning dreaming that I was drowning in liquid manure. But working hard alongside neighbors, small town citizens, and Iowa CCI, we were able to stop this factory farm. But since then, the number of facilities has boomed across the state of Iowa, and many problems for family farmers, Iowa citizens, and our environment are the result. I am living through the emptying out of rural America. I'm watching our small towns wither, jobs disappear, small town businesses closing, income and tax revenues leaving our communities instead of staying to support them. And I'm watching family farmers just like us leave the land. Donald Trump has taken the side of corporate ag business and monopolies and told the rest of us to get big or get out, and made our lives even worse. I want to reverse that dynamic and help America thrive again. The first step is that we have to vote Donald Trump out of office. To make rural America thrive, we need big, bold policies like fair prices for farmers and fair wages for workers. We need health care and good jobs to build a green infrastructure. This is all outlined in our People's Action Rural Agenda. But to get there, we have to defeat Donald Trump. We have to build community. We have to heal the divisions between us. And we can do that by building out real conversations like we're doing in the Deep Canvas.
Thank you so much, Barb. Good to see you today. Next, we're going to head to Alabama and hear from Warren Tidwell of Hometown Action. Warren, welcome.
Thank you. I'm tickled to be here today. What an honor to be here with you, Senator Sanders, to talk about these issues in the rural areas. I come from Walker County, Alabama. It's in the coal country foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. Both of my grandfathers were coal miners, and both of my grandmothers worked in textile mills. I often say I have coal dust and cotton lint in my DNA, and they were dying industries when I graduated high school in the 1990s, and both industries are on life support now. And along with all of those economic issues, over 20 years of doing grassroots disaster relief response, I've seen that climate change is fueling a series of disasters that are trapping people in cycles of recovery, meaning that they do not have time to recover from one disaster before another occurs. And as a progressive organizer in the rural South, I say I fight a two-front battle, meaning working for change here and convincing folks on the left that we have to stop abandoning these spaces. We need to work overtime to organize within them and with folks in rural spaces, because rural folks know rural problems and they know what needs to be done to start fixing them. And that's what happened in 2011 after the tornado super outbreak, where we had 62 tornadoes that killed 238 people here. People went to work. Race and class went out the window. Those same people have helped Hometown Action make and distribute over 100,000 cloth masks during the pandemic. But we have to get intentional about progressive organizing, and we have to get in these rural spaces, get uncomfortable, and approach the work without preaching at or judging the folks we hope to win over. We have to address climate change and the intersecting issues that are hurting folks in our rural areas. And that starts with relegating the Trump administration to the dustbin of history by electing Joe Biden and working like hell to push them to address these issues. There's so much potential in our rural areas. I know this, I promise you. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. That's powerful. Next up are Shuhalima Lynch and Pat Rogers of Down Home, North Carolina. Welcome.
Hi, Senator Sanders and everybody else out there listening to us. Just really excited to be here. My name is Shuhalima Lynch. I'm a community organizer with Down Home, North Carolina. And I was a public school teacher before that here in Alamance County for several years and started organizing locally when Down Home, North Carolina began hosting rallies for teachers in the areas to make our voices heard. The teacher walkouts in 2018 were a major part of rethinking a modern labor movement.
And I'm Pat Rogers. I'm an engineer here in Alamance County, and I started organizing locally around Medicaid expansion. So the first time Shug and I met actually was over an opportunity to interview our state rep about why he refused to back Medicaid expansion. Just, and the lack of that Medicaid expansion was causing the shutdown of rural hospitals. There's a coverage gap of like 600,000 North Carolinians, really horrible stuff. But that led to a kind of full day of getting to know each other and have conversations and a lot of waiting around. But my parents have always worked in hospitals in underserved areas, so I understood the effect of the coverage gap that we had in the state here, but I was never really able to pull it together to understand how that intersects with food insecurity, job insecurity, lack of education, and just in general, the criminal legal system.
It was really interesting getting to know Pat because, we're kind of on the opposite ends of the spectrum. My parents were migrant farm workers on the West Coast and always worked hard to make sure I got a good education. And I guess, that's pretty much how I ended up being a teacher. And even when times were challenging growing up, we always had access to social services. So when I moved to this rural community here in Alamance County, the idea that the lack of services were basically not around was very shocking. And, our white, Black, and brown community members struggle with poverty, segregation, lack of good jobs, healthcare, and practically no transportation.
So this election's really important up and down the ballot because as a country, it's past time for us to really reevaluate how much we care about every single one of the people around us. And fundamentally, every representative from school board to county commissioners to the president, they need to, reflect and understand the day-to-day needs of our communities.
Yeah, and even though, Pat and I come from different backgrounds, we still have things that we share in common, and it's going to take all of us to work together, to fight right now for the people that we care about and making sure their basic needs are met, making sure that people don't suffer without food or housing or healthcare. And that's how we're going to win this election, by coming together and fighting to elect people up and down the ballot who are going to do the right thing for rural communities.
Thank you, Senator Sanders.
Thanks.
Oh, so much. I love that last point. So now we're going to head to a state that's on many people's mind heading into November, and that's Michigan. And I want to introduce Dennis Kellogg, a sixth-generation farmer.
Hi, folks. Yes, I'm Dennis Kellogg, sixth-generation farmer in Gratiot County, Michigan. And I want to thank People's Action and Senator Sanders for hosting this today. We have experienced the results of the tariff war here, and it's hit us pretty hard here in central Michigan. Our farm prices really went into the tank for us, and that caused tremendous problems for us. Going back to even the government shutdown, early January and late December 2018, 2019, created problems, all caused by this guy named Donald Trump. Folks, I've voted both Democrat and Republican over the years, and we consider ourselves as really quite independent people, the farm community, and we look to the individual. And I think a lot of folks made a mistake betting on Donald Trump, and let's face it, he just didn't rise to the occasion. In Joe Biden, I see a man with compassion. I see someone that will really look to our rural areas and analyze our problems. And the folks that have already spoke today have expressed that we all need to work together, which we do. And I believe that we will. I think now is the time. So I'm asking my fellow rural farmer brothers and sisters to come and join us. Bring Joe Biden back to the Oval Office, this time as our president. And I think things can get better. I think we need to plan that there's going to be 100 more generations coming behind us. And we need to take care of our earth. We need to take care of our communities, and we can do it. We just need to get together. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Wow. Our next speaker is from my home state of Indiana. And unlike Mike Pence, this is a Hoosier I'm really proud of. I want to welcome Hannah Milano of Hoosier Action. Welcome, Hannah.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm from Madison, Indiana, which is a small town on the Ohio River. I want to tell you all a little bit about my father. He was a very charismatic person. He was always smiling and always friendly, but he always struggled with drugs. For the past 15 years of his life, my father was mostly homeless. I remember in high school, my mom and stepfather allowed him to crash on our couch during winter because they thought he'd die outside overnight. My father did not have health insurance or access to mental health services. So when he got a bad cough this past May, he did not go to the ER. One night he walked outside, laid down on a picnic table in the trailer park. He died that night on the picnic table alone and with no dignity. He was a good person and he didn't deserve to die like that. My death story in his life does not end with his death. My family has lived paycheck to paycheck my entire life. Not even just paycheck to paycheck, because I remember my mom having to take out payday loans to get us through. And to this day, my family still has debt that causes anxiety and fear about our future. And now my sister fights a daily struggle against the addiction that killed our father. My family deserves more. Better wages, healthcare, and mental health services. Thousands of white, Black, Indigenous, and people of color Hoosier families just like ours are struggling in rural and small town Indiana, while at the same time, the super rich and the big corporations are hoarding all the resources. It doesn't have to be this time like this. This is why we have to win this election. We have to stand together to fight for the investment that we need and that we deserve. I'm going to fight every day to create a better state so that no one has to die like my dad did. Thank you. And now I'd like to turn it back to you, Senator Sanders.
Well, Hannah, I want to thank all of the panelists because I think everyone had something really important to say. But I want to especially thank Hannah because the story that she just told us about her dad, struggles of her sister, the struggles of her family, those are the struggles of millions and millions of people throughout this country, especially in rural America. And I want everybody to remember, you are not living in a poor, developing country. You are living in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. But you are living, as Hannah indicated, in a nation in which the people on top are doing phenomenally well. Phenomenally well. Never have they done better. More income and wealth inequality today than at any time in the modern history of this country. And yet there are millions of families exactly like Hannah's struggling to put food on the table, to maintain just a semblance of security and dignity. So what this moment in history is about and what this campaign is about is not allowing Donald Trump and his friends to divide us up, whether we're white or we're black or we're Latino, whether we're gay, we're straight, whether we were born in America, we're born someplace else, who cares? Our job now is to bring our people together to do what the richest country in the history of the world can in fact do. Yeah, we can join every other major country, guarantee health care to all people as a human right, including mental health. Yeah, we can substantially lower the cost of prescription drugs. So we don't pay 10 times more for insulin than they pay in Canada. Yeah, we can make sure that all of our young people have the opportunity to get a higher education without going deeply in debt. Yeah, we can create millions and millions of good paying jobs, transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy, and combat climate change in the process. So with that, let me just thank again everybody who has participated and all of you who are watching. We got a month and a half to go to protect American democracy and to start building an economy that works for all of us and not just the very, very few. Okay, Misty, let me take it away.
All right, we do have a few questions from folks who are watching us live today. So we're gonna try to take a few of those. Our first one is gonna come from Helen Cluna. Helen joins us from Duluth, Minnesota. Helen, welcome to the show. What's your question?
Hi, Senator Sanders. My name is Helen Klana, and I'm from Duluth, Minnesota. I'm an 18-year-old organizer and student at St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota. On the Iron Range in Minnesota, people are forced to choose between having their immediate needs met through a job in the mining industry or a clean and just future where people and planet are put over profit. As a young person, I desperately want to be a part of this fight, but sometimes my future and the future of other young folks from rural Minnesota feels helpless. How will fighting the climate crisis help rebuild rural America and restore hope to young folks across the country?
Well, Helen, thank you very much for your work, and let me thank your entire generation for being inspiring me. I got to say that. Beautiful, beautiful generation of young people who are standing up to racism and sexism and homophobia and are prepared to take on the fossil fuel industry to save our planet. Now, the bottom line here is this, very briefly. Donald Trump may not know it, but the scientists do. And that we have a very short period of time to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel. The good news is that when we do that, when we invest in energy efficiency and sustainable energies like wind, solar, geothermal, we can create millions of good paying jobs, transforming our energy system, transforming agriculture. And on this issue, I have to say, anyone who has seen what's going on in California, if you've seen El Derecho in Iowa in the Midwest, if you see the terrible, terrible storms and hurricanes and heat waves that are impacting countries all over the world, we don't have a choice. If you want to save this planet for our kids and grandchildren, we have to take on the fossil fuel industry. And the good news is when we do that, when we invest in sustainable energies, we are going to create millions of jobs, which will be important all over America. But by the way, especially important in rural America. So I am a strong believer in a Green New Deal, in investing substantial sums of money. And it's something we've got to do, and we'll pay back in good paying jobs immediately.
Hard act to follow there, but Warren, you spoke a little bit about climate change. You're down there in Alabama. Do you have anything to add?
Absolutely. I'm right down the road from Tuskegee, Alabama, where a number of our civil rights icons like Fred Gray Sr. still live. When faced with the existential crisis of their generation, they met it with courage, with fearlessness, and with hope. They were beaten, bloodied, some killed. And now with the existential crisis of this generation, we will honor their work and we'll do the same, because the other option is simply unacceptable.
All right, so thank you, Warren. Let's go to our next question. So we have Viviana Rubio joining us from Sturgis, Michigan. Welcome to the show, Viviana.
Hi, my name is Savannah. I'm a first-generation Mexican American. I grew up in Sturgis, Michigan, a small town of over just 10,000 people. The first election I ever voted in was the 2016 election, and after that day, the election, it felt very surreal to me. I remember feeling disheartened about the outcome. It really made me feel like my vote didn't matter. I remember that day crying in my car. There was a lot of uncertainty about what the next 4 years would look like. I have family members and loved ones who are on DACA, and this put a lot of hardship on them. After the election, I decided to take action, and I became a lot more involved in my community. The type of work that I'm doing gives me hope that I'm building a connection with people, helping to build empathy so that we can see each other as human. Rural communities are made up of people of all walks of life, and as immigrants, my family is helping to build small towns like Sturgis. What can be done to bring people together, to stop fighting each other, and make sure that we focus on people who are really responsible for poverty and suffering in our communities? How can we help people understand the importance of building a multiracial movement in rural areas and small towns like where I grew up?
Well, Viviana, thank you very much for that excellent and important question. And I think what we have heard this afternoon from many of our panelists is a simple truth. And that is, whether you're Latino, whether you're Black, whether you're white, no matter who you are, you know what? You need healthcare. Bring people together around the demand that healthcare is a human right. And we join every other major country on earth in guaranteeing healthcare to every man, woman, child through, in my view, a Medicare for all single payer system. Many of our people need affordable prescription drugs. Just so happens the pharmaceutical industry is run by a bunch of crooks who could care less about the needs of ordinary Americans, and they're simply motivated by making huge amounts of profits. You know what? Whether you are a conservative Republican or a progressive Democrat or an independent, the day is going to come when you're going to need affordable prescription drugs. Bring people together around that issue. All over America, in Michigan, in Vermont, people are working for starvation wages. You know what? You can't make it on $10 an hour or $12 an hour. Bring people together around raising that minimum wage to a living wage, at least $15 an hour. Bring people together around making it easier for workers to join unions. Bring people together around the fight for equal pay, for equal work, because women, especially minority women, should not be making a fraction of the wages that white folks make. Climate change brings us together, because if we don't get a handle on climate change, all of us, no matter what your background is, you're going to be in real serious trouble. Criminal justice, we've got to come together around. So what I'm saying, Viviana, is that the most important issues, they don't just impact white people or Black people or Latino people. They impact all of us. Let us focus on those issues and point the finger at the insurance companies who make billions while 90 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured. The drug companies who rip us off every single day. Wall Street, who invest in all kinds of destructive activities, but can't help us build the affordable housing that we need. The military industrial complex makes a huge amount of money, and yet we end up spending more money on the military than the next 10 nations combined. So we got to get our priorities right. We got to need a government that works for all of us, takes care of our basic needs. That's how you bring people together.
That's right. And Ona, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, first I want to thank Viviana for that question. I really appreciate it as a rural person of color and coming from an immigrant family. I think that it doesn't matter really if we were born here or not, if we're white, Black, or brown. We are in our rural communities working the same jobs. We are working retail, we're working in factories, we're working in warehouses, we're working on farms, and we all want the same basic things at the end of the day. We want our families to be safe, we want our families to be healthy, and we want our families to be fed. We want our kids to have opportunities for success. And I think the only way that we can do that is by building multiracial organizations that are able to connect us together in the things that bind us, and so that we can work together on the issues that are most important to us.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. And I think we have time for one more question here. So we're going to bring in Adam Thompson from Boise, Idaho. Adam, welcome to the show. Do we have Adam?
Hi, Senator Sanders. My name is Adam Thompson. I'm a third-year college student in Boise, Idaho, and I'm Jewish. White nationalist groups have more than doubled in my state over the past 3.5 years. There's a threat of harm that I and diverse communities face all the time. But this was not an accident. Most people dismiss rural communities and places like Idaho as red and racist and invest in other places. While the progressive movement divested, the far right has invested everything to exploit the pain of the working class and pit us against one another. How do we make sure that the next administration listens to us? And what do you say to the people in rural communities like mine thinking about sitting this election out? Thank you.
Adam, thank you very much for that excellent question. Let me deal with the last part of your question. You cannot sit this election out. You really cannot. We have a president who is a pathological liar, and we cannot continue having someone like that in the White House. You don't want that. No matter what your views may be, you don't want a liar in the White House. You don't want somebody who does not believe in science. Look, we can disagree on issues, but you got to believe in science. You have to have policy based on scientific fact. And if you don't, you're going to have a disastrous response to the pandemic, which has certainly been the case under Donald Trump. And you are going to ignore the existential threat of climate change, which is certainly happening under Donald Trump. But maybe even more importantly, and now I'm talking to conservatives and I'm talking to Republicans. More important than who wins or loses this election is that we maintain American democracy. And you have heard from his own lips, this is not me telling you what he said. What Trump is saying is, if Trump loses this election, the only way is that it's a rigged election. Well, that's a lie. He may very well lose this election because the people want to throw him out of office. But Trump has indicated that he may very well refuse to accept the results of an election in which he loses. Now, especially in rural America, and I know this is true in the state of Vermont, we got a whole lot of people who have served in the military, who have fought and died to defend our Constitution. When you're a senator or when you're in the military, you swear an oath. And that oath of office is to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States of America. We have a president today who does not believe in the Constitution. In fact, he does not believe in the rule of law. So what we have got to do is come together. You cannot sit this election out. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there who say, well, I'm not overly enthusiastic about Joe Biden. I disagree with Joe on this issue and I don't like him on that issue and so forth. I got it. I disagree with Joe Biden on many, many issues. And trust me, the day after Biden is inaugurated, you're going to see a number of us in the Senate demanding that the Biden administration move forward in a more progressive way. Have the courage to take on the powerful special interest who have so much influence over our economic and political life, believe me. But right now, we can quibble about Biden's position on this issue or that issue. And by the way, if you read his positions, they're not Bernie Sanders' positions, but they're fairly strong. They'll improve life for a whole lot of people in a lot of ways. But now is not the time to argue about whether you like Joe on this or that. Now is the time, A, to come together to defeat Trump, and after Biden is elected, and this gets to the other point that Adam raised, then we stand up from Idaho to Vermont and all over this country as a people and say, government, you have ignored rural America for too long. You've ignored the working class of this country for too long. You've catered to the rich and the powerful. Hey, you're going to listen to us. And we're going to stand up and fight for that. So let's go forward together. And the message today, you live in rural America, you live in urban America. You're white, you're black, you're brown, whatever you may be. In the next 38 days, we've got to do everything that we can to defeat the most dangerous president in American history, elect Joe Biden. And after Biden is elected, we're going to continue aggressively to make sure that we have a government that works for all of us. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Senator. Really quick before we wrap our Q&A, I wanted to just hear from you, Shug and Pat. You guys had a really great story about coming together. Do you guys have something to add to that before we move into the closing our program?
Yeah, thank you, Misty. And thank you, Adam. Thank you, Senator Sanders. Here locally in Alamance County, we've built some sort of infamy at the state and national level. We've continued our debate over the presence of a Confederate monument here in our county seat. And unfortunately, just educating people about the vile history behind it has only gone so far to win hearts and minds. But what we have done is use sustained protests in the city of Graham that actually ended up forcing a major corporation to make a statement that actually really applied pressure to the county commissioners. So really what happened was the protests helped us to, build networks of engaged community members and raise the issue to a point where, the sheriff, who you might have heard in the song by Joe Troop earlier, he couldn't just make a couple arrests and call it a day. So I think the lesson that we take from that is that our power as progressive actors extends past just, our civil duty of voting, which we do have to do. But so our participation drives the electoral process, but our everyday participation is what drives the economy. And so we have a lot of tools that we can hold our elected officials accountable with. So I've seen really beautiful mutual aid work around COVID. I've seen people helping the unhoused. I've seen strikes. I've seen boycotts. I've seen protests. Those all raise the temperature. Those raise the pressure that we need. But really the first step of creating that lasting change is electing representatives who don't take white supremacy as, for granted, as their basis, their ground zero. What we have to do is, it's easy to feel forgotten right now, but local organizing around specific issues that affect every one of us, that's how we protect our most vulnerable community members when we have a hostile administration. But, that's how we cement and push for transformative change when we have a friendly administration. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. Thank you for those questions. And I just want to thank all the panelists and everybody tuning in. Thank you for those powerful testimonies. We've heard about what's happening in rural America. We know we've got to fight for rural America, and we have to win this election. So, George, what can folks do who are watching right now, who are committed to helping us to defeat Donald Trump and continue to fight for rural America?
Thanks, Misty. We've got 3 calls to action. So first, we ask everybody, if you haven't registered to vote and have your plan to vote. As we learned in 2016, every vote's going to matter. And you can do that really simply right now by just going to vote.org. It's that simple. Second, if you're kind of inspired by what you heard today, you can tune into the beautiful organizing happening in the exact communities that so many people have written off. You can do that by subscribing to see each other, or just go to peoplesaction.org/podcast. And finally, we're asking people to sign up for a Deep Canvas phone bank with People's Action. This program has proven to be wildly effective at helping people change their views on issues, but also on who they're going to vote for. Just one example, 8.5% of independent women voters we talked to through Deep Canvassing who plan to vote for Donald Trump are now planning to vote for Biden-Harris. This from one 15-minute conversation. So now I want to hand it over to Maria Elena Fournier of Michigan People's Campaign. Maria Elena has deep canvassed in rural Michigan on immigration. She's been big on the phones in this election. I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who's had more of these deep canvas conversations. Maria Elena.
Yeah, thank you, George. Hello, everybody. My name is Maria Elena, and the stakes for us in this election are really high. This election is literally about life or death for me and my community. I originally am from Puerto Rico, and I lost both of my parents to a lack of healthcare and resources in our community before I even turned 15. My mom to cancer, my father to Alzheimer's. And now me and my brothers are facing the same death sentence a decade later simply for being poor working class with pre-existing conditions. And this isn't fair. When I started making these calls, I cannot lie, I was skeptical, but these conversations ended up changing my life and the lives of those I spoke to on the phone. We shared stories and experiences none of us could have ever imagined sharing with a stranger. Everyone, no matter what their political affiliation was, They were happy and many were in tears, including myself plenty of times, for having a chance to have their voice heard. Through sharing our experiences with one another, folks felt validated and understood, and this really helped remind them of their stake in this election. At the beginning of our conversation, a lot of them would tell me one person can't make a difference, but towards the end, they all agreed we cannot do this alone and that their vote matters. We cannot have a revolution or even something close to reform if we cannot talk to our neighbors. We need all of you to win this election. Our lives literally depend on it. So if all of us volunteered at least once a week to phone bank, we will win this election. Not can, we will. So to get involved, text WIN to 79606. Again, text WIN to 79606. And I really appreciate you all for being here, and I'll pass it back to you, George.
Yes, thank you, Maria Elena. So glad to work with you. And now I want to hand it back to Senator Sanders.
Well, let me also thank Maria Elena for her cogent remarks. And let me thank George and People's Action for the great work that they are doing. And let me thank all of our panelists. This was a very, very powerful panel talking about issues that are just not talked about enough.